Samantha stood in my living room, her smile colder than a January wind, while the notary flipped through documents like a card dealer at a wake. I smiled right back and said, "Perfect timing, but let's make a quick stop at the police station first. They've been waiting for the paperwork I sent yesterday." The color drained from her cheeks faster than water swirling down a drain. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. You're probably wondering how I ended up here, staring down the daughter-in-law who thought she could outwit a 68-year-old woman. Well, buckle up because this story begins with the most humiliating day of my life and ends with the most satisfying. 2 days earlier, I watched my only son, David, marry Samantha in the very same chapel where I had said my vows 35 years ago. The ceremony was stunning. She looked radiant, and for a fleeting moment I thought we might finally find common ground. After all, she was carrying my first grandchild. How foolish of me. The reception was held at the country club, the one where I had waited tables for years to put David through school. I had even scraped together $15,000 toward their wedding, saved from my small pension, walking to the market instead of driving and living on generic brand groceries. "Elaine has been such a blessing," Samantha cooed to a table of her friends, her voice sticky sweet, the kind that makes your stomach turn. "She's been living with us for months, helping with the house down payment. Such a generous mother-in-law." The women smiled politely, but I caught the look they shared. They thought I was some pitiful old woman who couldn't live alone anymore. What Samantha didn't bother to mention was how I ended up there. 3 months earlier, she'd convinced David that my little apartment wasn't safe for someone my age. "What if you fall?" she'd whispered with crocodile tears. "What if no one finds you for hours?" Before I realized it, I was moved into their spare room, temporarily, while we searched for something more appropriate. Meanwhile, the $15,000 I'd given them for their down payment had somehow turned into a loan that would be repaid when things settled down. Things never settle down when someone else is busy draining your savings. "She's practically family," Samantha added. The way she lingered on "practically" squeezed my chest tight. After 5 years of dating my son and nearly a year of wedding planning, I was still being treated like an outsider, an unpaid guest auditioning for approval. But the true humiliation came later during the speeches. David raised his glass, smiling proudly at his bride. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible. My beautiful wife, our families, and of course my mother who has always been there for me." Polite applause followed. Nothing unusual. Then Samantha stood, glowing in her wedding dress, and the room hushed. "I also want to say a few words about Elaine," she said, her smile shining like a chandelier. My chest swelled for a moment, thinking maybe I'd misjudged her. "She's taught me so much about family loyalty," Samantha went on. "She's shown me that real mothers never stop caring for their children, no matter how old they get. Some mothers step back when their sons marry. But not Elaine. She's proven a mother's job is never truly done." The applause was hesitant now, scattered and uneasy. But she wasn't finished. "She's even helping us financially because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice for their children's happiness. It's inspiring, really, to see such selflessness." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every pair of eyes turned toward me, and I knew exactly what had just happened. In one calculated speech, Samantha had branded me a dependent, a clingy old woman who couldn't let go, still paying her grown son's bills. But the real blow came the next morning. I walked into the kitchen to find Samantha seated with a man in a suit. "Elaine," she said brightly as if nothing had changed, "this is Mr. Foster from Hamilton Legal. We need to go over some documents." I poured myself a cup of coffee, steadying my hands. 42 years of motherhood had taught me to recognize an ambush when I saw one. "What kind of documents?" I asked. "Well," Samantha glanced at the notary, "David and I have been talking. You've been so generous with the down payment, and we want to make sure you're looked after as you age." The coffee soured in my mouth. "What exactly does that mean?" Mr. Foster cleared his throat. "Mrs. Walker, your son and daughter-in-law have arranged for you to move into Silver Pines Assisted Living. A lovely facility with full-time care. The deposit is already made." My cup hit the table with more force than intended. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Samantha said sweetly, though her eyes gleamed with steel. "David's been so worried about you living alone. And lately, Elaine, you've seemed a little forgetful." Forgetful. The word cut like a blade. I was 68, not 98, and sharper than most half my age. But Samantha had been planting this narrative for weeks. Comments about me misplacing things, correcting me over details, subtle suggestions of confusion. Forgetful, I echoed. Or are you hoping I forget that my name is on the deed to this house? Her smile flickered. Actually, that's part of what we need to discuss. David and I want to refinance, and it would be simpler if the title was just in our names. Cleaner, legally speaking. And my $15,000? Think of it as a wedding gift, she said sweetly. Surely you want your son happy? The notary shifted uncomfortably, checking his watch. He probably hadn't realized he was witnessing theft disguised as paperwork. And where is David? I asked coldly. Shouldn't he be part of this conversation? At the gym, Samantha replied smoothly. All this financial stress is hard on him, so he asked me to handle it. You understand newlywed nerves. Of course. David had always avoided difficult conversations, especially about money. At 12, he'd written me a letter asking for a bike. At 17, his girlfriend had called to tell me he'd wrecked his car. And now, at 42, he was still hiding behind others. Mrs. Walker, the notary said gently, these papers transfer your claim on the property in exchange for your first year of assisted living fees. 1 year? I asked. And after that? Samantha shrugged. We'll cross that bridge later. Maybe you'll love it there so much you won't want to leave. The audacity was staggering. They'd staged this entire scheme. The wedding speeches, the move into their home, the appearance of dependence. And now the finale, stripping away my independence in one stroke. But they had underestimated me. I'll need time to think about this, I said firmly, standing up. Her mask slipped. Elaine, it would be far easier to just handle it now. I'm sure it would, I replied coolly. But I'm not signing anything today. The notary looked relieved. Of course. Take all the time you need. After they left, I sat in the very living room I had helped decorate, staring at walls I'd painted and furniture I'd paid for. Samantha had forgotten one crucial fact. I'd been David's mother for 42 years. I knew every trick, every avoidance, every scheme. I'd spent a lifetime learning how to play the long game. That afternoon, while Samantha left for her post-wedding manicure, I opened the fireproof box she had oh so helpfully locked in their closet. Inside were the papers I needed. The original deed listing both David and me, the canceled check marked down payment $15,000, and the power of attorney David had convinced me to sign months earlier. Samantha had pitched it as a precaution. Just in case something happens to you, Elaine, David can help with your affairs. It's common for people your age. What she didn't know was that I'd had my lawyer add a clause. It only took effect if 2 independent doctors declared me mentally unfit. Which I most certainly was not. That evening, David texted, "Sorry I missed the meeting. How did it go?" I stared at the message. My own son reducing me to a transaction handed off to his wife. I typed back, "We'll discuss when you're home." He replied instantly, "Actually, I'm staying with Mark tonight. Wedding recovery. Amanda can fill me in tomorrow. Wedding recovery. Married 2 days and already dodging his responsibilities." That night, over Chinese takeout, Samantha's confidence was palpable. She thought time and pressure would wear me down. "Elaine," she said, clearing the dishes, "everything we're doing is for love. David just wants you safe. This arrangement would give him peace of mind." "I'm sure it would," I said flatly. "Silver Pines is wonderful. Activities, social hours, even a library. You'd make friends your own age." "People my own age?" I repeated. "As though I've aged out of the rest of the world?" She blinked. "We toured it. Spacious rooms, great staff. Much more suitable for your needs." "My needs," I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, Elaine. Senior needs. Medical care, companionship, structure. At nearly 70, independence gets harder. We're just being realistic." I was 68, but she'd been rounding me up for months, aging me in her story before her friends, before my son, until I barely recognized myself in the version she painted. "I see," I said quietly. "And when exactly did you and David decide I couldn't manage my own choices?" Her patience thinned. "We're not saying you're incapable, Elaine. Just that it's time to accept your limitations." Limitations. Conveniently defined as anything standing between her and my property. That night, I lay awake in the guest room. the room that was supposed to be a temporary solution and now felt like a holding cell. Samantha had made it crystal clear. Silver Pines would happen whether I cooperated or not. She and David were leaning on that power of attorney, painting me as forgetful and unfit. But Samantha had underestimated me again. She seemed to think that a woman who'd raised a son alone, worked 2 jobs, survived widowhood, and built a life from scraps could be cornered so easily. Tuesday morning, I rose early and made blueberry pancakes, David's favorite since he was 5 years old. Back then, he'd sit at our wobbly kitchen table in our tiny apartment, telling me he dreamed of owning a big house one day. I wanted him to have that life. I never imagined he'd use it to try and cage me. "These smell amazing," Samantha said as she breezed into the kitchen in silk pajamas, perfectly styled even before breakfast. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said lightly. "Just felt like cooking." She settled into a chair, cutting her pancake into neat little squares. "I hope you've thought about yesterday's discussion, Elaine. Mr. Foster said he's available to return this afternoon, if you're ready to move forward." "I've been thinking," I replied, taking my own seat. "Good," she said warmly. "I know it's hard to let go of independence, but sometimes those who love us have to make the tough choices on our behalf." I took a bite, savoring the burst of blueberries before asking, "Samantha, what made you decide I needed assisted living?" She blinked. I explained, "Your age, your safety." "No, I mean specifically. What happened that made you believe I couldn't manage on my own?" Her fork paused midair. "It's not one thing, Elaine. It's overall vulnerability." "There must have been something," I pressed. "A fall? Forgetting the stove? Medication errors?" "Not exactly," she hedged. "But these things, wandering at night, confusion, memory lapses, they happen. We don't wait for tragedy. We act first." "So," I said evenly, "you can't point to a single concrete incident that proves I'm unsafe." Her composure faltered. "It's about the bigger picture. The bigger picture of a woman who handles her own finances, maintains her health, drives, cooks, and has a social life," I countered. "I lived on my own for over a decade without issue. I only came here because you convinced me it wasn't safe." Samantha put down her fork, her polished tone cracking. "I don't understand why you're making this so difficult. We're trying to help you." "Are you?" I asked softly. "Or are you helping yourselves to what belongs to me?" The silence was so sharp I could hear the refrigerator hum. "How dare you?" she whispered, her cheeks flushing. "I'm asking a fair question. If this is about my well-being, why does it also mean you get full control of a property I invested in?" She shoved back her chair. "I don't have to listen to this. You're being paranoid." "Am I? Then let's alter the arrangement. I'll consider Silver Pines, but my name stays on the deed with David's. That way I'm secure and you get your peace of mind." "That's not how the paperwork is written." "Paperwork can be rewritten." Her eyes hardened, something cold and calculating slipping through. "You know your problem, Elaine. You can't let go. You can't accept that David has a wife and his own family now. You still want to control him financially and emotionally." The words hit me in the chest because there was just enough truth to sting. Yes, I'd struggled with David's marriage, with feeling displaced. But that didn't mean I deserved to be stripped of my assets. Even if that were true, I said steadily, it wouldn't justify deception. Samantha laughed, brittle like glass shattering. "Deception? You gave us that money. You chose to move in. Nobody forced you. After you wore down my confidence with comments about my memory, with little hints about my safety. You've been setting this up for months, haven't you?" Her face froze. For a moment the mask slipped and I saw her true expression. Cold calculation. "You're imagining things," she said flatly. But her voice lacked its practiced sweetness. "Am I?" I walked to the drawer and pulled out a notebook. "Let's check the timeline." I flipped it open. "March 15th, you told David I left the stove on after breakfast. Except that morning I made toast, not used the stove." Her jaw clenched. "March 22nd, you told him I forgot dinner plans. Except you canceled them yourself that morning." I turned another page. "April 3rd, you said I couldn't follow conversation. The truth? I asked you to speak louder because you were whispering." "Elaine." "April 18th, you told the neighbor I was confused about the day. I just asked if it was Tuesday or Wednesday while recovering from the flu." Her silence told me everything. You've been compiling a false record against me, I said, twisting every ordinary moment into evidence of decline. You're paranoid, she snapped. Then why did you tell the wedding planner I was confused when I disagreed with your flower choice? Why did you tell David I was obsessed with money when I asked about my 15,000? Because you were being inappropriate, she shot back. Inappropriate. I laughed bitterly. For asking about my own money? It's not your money anymore, she exploded. You gave it to us. A gift. You can't give a gift and then hover over how it's spent. A gift. I said coldly. The loan agreement says otherwise. Her face drained of color. I spread the documents across the table. The loan papers, the deed with both names, the power of attorney with its competency clause. And then the email I'd found. Her eyes widened. What email? The one where you wrote to David, we need to move faster on the Elaine situation. She's asking too many questions. She went pale. You built this plan to strip me of everything, I said. Move me into Silver Pines, take power of attorney and silence me. Tears spilled down her perfect face. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The mortgage, the wedding, the baby. We needed. You needed my money and property, I interrupted. But not me. That's not true, she cried. Isn't it? Because the plan was clear. Sign away my assets, shove me into assisted living and keep me quiet. How long before you convinced David I was too senile for visits? She sobbed. We weren't trying to hurt you. We just needed security. At the cost of mine, I said coldly. You're old, Elaine. You don't need security like we do. We have decades ahead of us, careers, a child to raise. You can't understand. And there was the ugly truth. To her, my years were expendable, my needs negotiable. You're right, I said softly. I probably don't have decades left. Which is why I won't waste the time I do have being controlled by someone who sees me as disposable. The hope in her eyes vanished. I'm not signing, Samantha. Not today, not ever. If you and David want me out, you'll have to go through court. And that means proving incompetence, not just inconvenience. Her mask shattered completely. You selfish, bitter old woman, she hissed. Do you realize what you're doing to David? To us. I had been waiting for this moment. The mask gone, her true self revealed. Enlighten me, I said calmly. You're destroying his happiness. Forcing him to choose between his wife and his mother. What kind of mother does that? The kind who taught him that love doesn't come with a price tag, I said evenly. She laughed bitterly. Love? You call this love? You've been guilting him his whole life. Controlling him. You've never let him go. Something cold settled in my chest. What do you mean? Asked my voice low. David told me everything, Elaine, Samantha said, eyes glittering. How you guilt-tripped him into staying here for college instead of going to Stanford. How you always seemed to have a sudden health scare whenever he dated someone seriously. How you made him feel chained to you after his father died. You made him responsible for your loneliness. Every word landed like a blade. Because like the most effective lies, they carried threads of truth, bent, twisted, and weaponized. I supported his choice of college, I said softly. After you cried about being left alone, she countered. After you reminded him how hard you worked to give him a future. And wouldn't it be nice if he stayed close so you could see him often? Maybe I had said those things. Maybe I had been lonely, grieving, terrified of an empty house and an empty life. But I had never tried to trap him. And the so-called health scares? Samantha pressed, sensing weakness. The chest pains when he got serious with Jennifer? The dizzy spells when he was planning to move to Chicago with Sarah? My mouth went dry. Those episodes had been real. Stress-induced, yes, but confirmed by a doctor. Still the timing. You've been manipulating him for years, she snapped. Always playing the victim so you'd remain the center of his life. And you're doing it again now. I'm not, I said. Yes, you are, she shot back. You're forcing him to choose between his mother and his pregnant wife. Between your comfort and his family's future. Who does that? Her accusations struck hard because there was a sliver of truth I couldn't deny. Had I leaned too heavily on David after his father passed? Had I unintentionally pulled him closer out of fear? Perhaps. But that didn't justify their plan to rob me of everything. Even if what you say is true, I managed, it doesn't give you the right to cheat me. Cheat you? Samantha's voice rose to a shrill pitch. We're taking care of you. Making sure you have a safe place to live and proper care when you need it. By stealing my money and locking me away in a place I never chose, I shot back. By making sure you don't end up alone, helpless with no one around, she retorted. I'd rather be alone, I said coldly, than surrounded by people who see me as a burden. That's when her mask cracked completely. Fine, she hissed. Her voice was sharp as ice. You want to play hardball, Elaine? Let's play. You have 24 hours to change your mind. Or what? I asked. Her smile was chilling. Or I tell David about the pills. Ice water surged through my veins. What pills? The Xanax I found in your purse, she purred. The prescription that isn't yours. The stash you've been hiding. I stared at her, the truth dawning. Those weren't mine. They belonged to Sarah Lopez, a neighbor who'd asked me to pick them up because she couldn't get off work. I'd planned to drop them at her apartment, but she'd moved out of state suddenly, leaving me with the bottle in my bag. You're going to accuse me of abusing prescription drugs, I whispered. I'm going to express concern about your judgment, Samantha corrected smoothly. About possible addiction. Add that to your paranoid ramblings about fraud, your so-called confusion, your supposed forgetfulness. And David will have no choice but to petition the court for guardianship. For your own good, of course. I sank into a chair, the full scope of her plan unfolding before me. She hadn't just been laying the groundwork for assisted living. She'd been building a case for complete control. Over me, over my assets, over my entire life. You planned this. I whispered. I prepared for every outcome, Samantha said coolly. I hoped you'd cooperate. But I was ready in case you didn't. David would never. David will do what he has to do to protect his family, she cut me off. And I am his family now. You're just the woman who raised him. The cruelty left me breathless. Mr. Foster will be here at 2 o'clock, she added, checking her watch. You can sign the papers willingly and move to Silver Pines with dignity. Or fight it and get declared incompetent by a judge. Your choice. She walked toward the door, then turned back. And Elaine, if you even think about telling David what we just discussed, remember, you're a confused old woman with a drug problem. Who do you think he'll believe, his pregnant wife or his unstable mother? After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen where I'd flipped pancakes that very morning. Everything had changed. Samantha had shown me exactly how deep her scheme went, how carefully she'd plotted to erase me. But she had made one final, fatal mistake. She had forgotten that I'd spent 42 years learning my son's habits, his patterns, his blind spots. And that I, too, had mastered the art of patience and planning. At precisely 1:45 p.m., Mr. Foster arrived with his briefcase and polished efficiency. Mrs. Walker, he said politely. I understand you're ready to finalize the assisted living arrangements. I smiled at him, the same smile I'd given people who underestimated me my entire life. Actually, Mr. Foster, I'd like to discuss something very different. Samantha froze halfway through pouring him coffee. Elaine, we agreed. No, I said firmly. We never agreed. But I did make a few phone calls this morning. I pulled a manila folder from my purse. The same purse where she thought she'd found incriminating pills. Mr. Foster, are you familiar with this state's elder abuse laws? He hesitated. That's not really my specialty. Then allow me to explain, I said evenly. Financial exploitation of a senior is a felony. Punishable by up to 10 years in prison. And full restitution. Samantha's hand shook as she set down her cup. Elaine, what are you? I'm talking about fraud, I interrupted. About a deliberate scheme to strip me of my independence and assets. I spread the folder across the table like a winning hand of cards. Here's the original loan agreement for the down payment, clearly marked as money to be repaid. Here's the deed showing my joint ownership. Here's the email chain between you and David about the so-called Elaine situation. Samantha went pale. And here, I said, sliding another paper across, is a letter from my physician, Dr. Lin, confirming no signs of cognitive decline, no dementia, no impairment whatsoever. The lawyer shifted in his chair, discomfort etched across his face. And just yesterday, I added, I had a conversation with Detective Alvarez from the Sheriff's Elder Abuse Division. Mr. Foster's eyes widened. Mrs. Walker, I think perhaps. Oh no, I cut him off. You're already involved. Knowingly helping someone exploit an elderly person makes you an accessory. The man blanched. I was told this was voluntary. By whom? Did you ask me directly? Or did you just take Samantha's word? He swallowed hard. Samantha's voice cracked. Elaine, you're twisting. I'm exposing, I corrected. And if you think anyone will buy your story over mine, think again. I am 68 in good health and fully competent. You, on the other hand, just tried to strip me of my rights. The lawyer edged toward the door. I'll need to consult with my office. Do that, I said sweetly. And check whether your malpractice insurance covers fraud. After he fled, Samantha collapsed into a chair. Her voice was hoarse. You don't understand. The bills. The debt. The baby coming. I understand perfectly, I said coldly. You're drowning. And instead of learning to swim, you tried to drag me under with you. It wasn't supposed to be theft, she whispered. It was redistribution. You don't need it the way we do. You don't have decades left. There it is again, I said. My age is your excuse. She sobbed, tears streaking her perfect face. What do you want from us? What will make you drop this? I stood, gazing out the window at the garden I'd helped plant, the fence I'd fixed, the life I'd contributed to. I want my $15,000 back, with interest. I want my name removed from the deed. And I want both of you to sign a statement admitting what you tried to do. We can't, she choked. We don't have the money. Then sell your new furniture. Cancel your vacation. Get a second job. Figure it out. And if we don't? I turned, letting her see the steel in my eyes. Then I press charges. And we'll let a jury decide if your desperation justifies elder abuse. That evening, David finally came home. I heard the car in the drive, Samantha's hurried whisper at the door, the panic in her tone. 20 minutes later, he knocked on the guest room door where I was folding clothes into a suitcase. Mom, can we talk? I looked up from the sweater I'd bought with my first pension check. Of course, sweetheart. He looked broken, pale, exhausted, like a man realizing his life was built on sand. Amanda told me about today, he said, his voice cracking. About the accusations. They're not accusations, I said evenly. They're facts. With evidence. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Mom, I need you to understand. We never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I said quietly. The only question is whether you meant to, or whether you just didn't care enough to think about the consequences. That's not fair, David said quietly, though his voice wavered. Not fair. I set the sweater aside and looked him straight in the eye. You let your wife convince you I was losing my mind without so much as speaking to my doctor. You agreed to send me to a facility you never visited. And you planned to strip me of my property rights without even bothering to sit at the table. That's not just unfair, David. That's cowardice. He flinched like a boy caught lying. The gym. I was scared, Mom. I didn't know how to handle it. Samantha said she'd take care of it all. Make it easy. Easy for you to let me be robbed, I cut in. It wasn't robbery, Mom. God, you make it sound like we're criminals. I stopped packing and really looked at him. At 42, still wearing the same guilt-ridden expression he had at 12 when he broke our neighbor's window and swore it was an accident. What would you call it then? I asked evenly. Taking someone's money under false pretenses, trying to have them declared incompetent so you can control their assets, whittling away at their independence piece by piece. If that isn't theft, what is it? He buried his face in his hands. We were trying to protect you. From what? Living in my own home with my own money, making my own choices. From being alone. From falling with no one around. From being taken advantage of. The irony made me laugh bitterly. The only people who've tried to exploit me, David, are you and your wife. His shoulders sagged. I don't know how this got so twisted. It got twisted, I said firmly, when you stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like a problem to be managed. That's not true. Your wife is a predator, I continued softly. She's done this before. I am not her first victim. What are you saying? Ask her mother, I said simply. Then ask yourself if you ever really knew the woman you married. That evening, Patricia called again. Elaine, thank you for pressing charges. The police are uncovering more victims. Your case opened a much bigger investigation. I swallowed hard. How much bigger? She exploited at least 3 elderly men she dated briefly, all left with financial problems. And she was fired from an assisted living job years ago for suspected theft from residents. My heart twisted. Samantha hadn't targeted me because I was David's mother. She had targeted me because I was vulnerable and useful. Does David know? I told him today. He's processing. My son, blindsided by the truth about the woman he married. How is he handling it? I asked softly. Patricia's voice was heavy. About as well as you'd expect. David was shattered, furious, confused, and lashing out at everyone except Samantha. But the evidence was undeniable, and even he couldn't hide from it forever. That night, sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling the same thoughts. The baby growing inside Samantha, an innocent life born into this mess. David watching his world collapse around him. The other victims who had crossed Samantha's path before me. And me sitting with the choice I'd made weeks ago. Stay quiet and let her strip me of everything, or fight back and accept the consequences. I had chosen to fight. And while the fallout would ripple for years, I knew it was the right choice. Because when dealing with people who mistake kindness for weakness, the only loving thing to do is to draw boundaries that bite. At midnight my phone rang. David's name lit the screen. "Mom," he whispered, his voice ragged. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For not believing you. For not protecting you. For choosing her over you. You don't have to choose between us," I said gently. "You just have to choose between right and wrong." "I might lose everything," he choked. "The house, my marriage, my family." "Maybe," I admitted. "But you'll still have the one thing that matters most." "What's that?" "Your integrity. And the chance to be the kind of man your father would have been proud of." He broke then, sobbing the way a child does when they can't hold it in anymore. And I cried with him. For the family we thought we had, for the grandchild who would inherit the weight of these choices, for the innocence that had been destroyed. But under the grief there was something else. Relief. Because for the first time in months my son was finally seeing clearly. And that meant there was still hope. 6 months later I stood in the courthouse, watching Samantha plead guilty to 3 counts of elder financial abuse. She looked smaller without the designer clothes and painted on perfection. A woman stripped of her costume. David sat 2 rows back with Patricia Winters, his head bowed. He had filed for divorce 3 weeks after the arrest, when Samantha's past finally came to light. The baby, a little girl, had been born healthy despite the turmoil. They'd named her Emma Elaine Walker. David's attempt to honor me after all the damage. "Your Honor," Samantha's lawyer pleaded, "my client regrets her actions. She asks for leniency, given her status as a new mother." Judge Ramos didn't blink. "Mrs. Walker, you deliberately targeted vulnerable elders. These weren't lapses. They were a pattern of calculated abuse spanning years." Samantha wept, the same tears she'd used as weapons for so long. "You pleaded guilty to defrauding Mrs. Elaine Walker of $15,000, attempting to coerce her into signing away property, and fabricating claims about her mental state. The sentence is 18 months in state prison, followed by 3 years probation and full restitution." 18 months. It felt short for the pain she'd caused, but more justice than I had dared hope for. After the hearing, David and I stepped into the spring sunlight. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Tired," I admitted. "But free." I thought about Emma, about the little girl who would grow up knowing her mother's truth. "She'll be okay," I said. "Better to grow up with honesty than live inside lies." David stopped walking, turning to me. "Mom, I need to confess something. When Samantha was pushing me to believe you were incompetent, a part of me wanted to. Because it was easier than admitting the truth about my marriage, about her, about me." His honesty stung, but I was grateful for it. "I let her twist how I saw you," he said, voice breaking. "I let her convince me that loving you was betrayal. I chose comfort over courage, and it almost cost me everything." I squeezed his hand, the same hand I'd held crossing streets, celebrating graduations and wiping away childhood tears. "We all make mistakes, David. What matters is what we learn from them." He looked at me, eyes wet. "What I learned is that my mother is the strongest, smartest, most resilient woman I know. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." 3 weeks later, David brought Emma to my apartment. She was beautiful, dark hair like her father, Patricia's delicate nose, and eyes that seemed to take in everything. "She's perfect," I whispered, holding her tiny body against mine. "Mom," David said softly. "I've been thinking about the house. I can't afford it without Samantha's income. And honestly, I don't want to live there anymore. Too many bad memories. I want to sell it and give you half the proceeds. It's not everything I owe, but it's a start." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You taught me that family takes care of each other. I forgot that once. I won't again." 6 months later, David and Emma had moved into a modest house just 3 blocks from me. David worked 2 jobs but still came over for dinner twice a week. We'd sit on my small balcony while Emma played and talk about everything except Samantha. Patricia became an unexpected friend. She visited often, helping with Emma, sharing stories, and reminding me that sometimes family is chosen as much as it is given. "You know," she said one afternoon as we watched Emma wobble into her first steps, "this little one is going to be just fine. Especially because of what she'll grow up seeing, that choices have consequences, that integrity matters, and that the women in her family don't back down." I smiled, thinking of the letter I'd already written for Emma to read when she was older. In it, I told her everything. About her mother's choices, about the difference between love and manipulation, about the strength that comes from refusing to be anyone's victim. Watching her toddle across my living room, I realized something unexpected. Samantha had given me a gift. She'd reminded me who I was. A woman who doesn't surrender. A woman who protects what matters. A woman who proves that being 68 doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't punishment. It's simply living well. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.